Max Verstappen has had a very complicated relationship with Red Bull. In 2025, his manager walked into the Red Bull garage and gave Helmut Marko a piece of his mind. It went viral in hours. 16 months later, Red Bull put a contract on the table to keep Max, and his response was brutal. The offer, the denial, and the doors that won't open. Red Bull's response to an armed exit clause was the most predictable one in the sport. Buy it.
That clause is not going away. Red Bull have tried to buy it off him.
They did not approach it delicately either.
They've literally offered him money to get rid of the clause from the contract.
Early speculation put that buyout around €8.9 million as a one-off payment, figures denied in some reporting. By late July 2026, the offer had grown far more ambitious. Bild claimed Red Bull had tabled a restructured deal, an extension through 2029, a pay rise on a base salary already sitting near €65 million a year, in exchange for the exit clauses disappearing from the document entirely. GP blog built on that, reporting that Red Bull's management wanted the clauses gone specifically to end the annual summer ritual of speculation about where Max Verstappen will be driving next year. The same reporting insisted the mood inside Milton Keynes was calm, that despite his public criticism, Verstappen was perfectly happy at Red Bull and nobody inside the outfit feared losing him. That sat awkwardly beside every other report in circulation, which described a strained relationship between the drivers' camp and senior management. And then, on Sunday 3 August 2026, Jos Verstappen ended the debate in 4 words. Responding on X to Dutch coverage of the reported offer, the 54-year-old wrote, "You know absolutely nothing." In the Dutch reporting, Jullie weten helemaal niks. No elaboration, no correction of specifics. Just a flat, public refusal to let the story stand. From a man who has spent his son's entire career as the family's blunt instrument. It was covered everywhere as a shutdown of the speculation, and it functions as one because it denies the terms without denying the negotiation. Max, meanwhile, has been dismantling the other narrative, that Red Bull is in decline. Speaking to Racing News 365, he rejected the idea of a rebuild outright. "I wouldn't call it rebuilding." He described the work as fine-tuning and called Red Bull his second family, which raises the question that decides everything. If he did activate the clause, where would he go? Mercedes have doubled down on George Russell and Kimi Antonelli. Ferrari have Hamilton and Leclerc, both extended, and the Mercedes route may have shut entirely.
Mercedes, according to Motorsport Italia, has rejected Max Verstappen.
The reported reason was not money. Verstappen was apparently willing to cut his own salary substantially, but he wanted length, and Mercedes do not sell length.
Verstappen was willing to lower his salary to just €50 million annually, but he demanded a 3-year contract.
Toto Wolff runs a 1+1 structure and reportedly refused to break it, leaving Verstappen with one realistic destination and an obvious complication attached to it.
So yeah, like I said, the big option really is McLaren. But would Max want to move to McLaren?
McLaren have publicly backed Norris and Piastri. Talks with Verstappen's management were reported earlier in the season, but viable 2027 seats look thin, which leaves Red Bull holding a driver they cannot replace and cannot guarantee a winning car for.
So the big question is, how does Red Bull hold on to Max?
The idea now circulating is not a salary at all. It is equity.
And the idea that's being floated right now is they're going to give him an ownership stake in Racing Bulls.
Handing Verstappen a stake in Racing Bulls would separate the two entities on paper and solve Red Bull's B-team problem in one move, while creating a driver who races for one constructor and part owns a rival on the same grid. It is unconfirmed. It would also rewrite the political map of the paddock.
Max Verstappen would become one of the most powerful F1 drivers ever in motorsport.
So that is where the story stands. A garage confrontation a reporter happened to witness. A collapse in standards that had defined a dynasty. A team principal removed. An advisor departed. A championship lost by 2 points. A clause that armed itself the moment the mathematics turned. And a father with 4 words and no interest in explaining them. Laurent Mekies keeps repeating that Max has told the team he wants to stay, provided the car lets him fight at the front. Raymond Vermeulen framed it in one line that explains the entire standoff. Max wasn't born to race in the midfield. The heated exchange. Bahrain, April 2025. Verstappen arrived at the Sakhir International Circuit off the back of a win in Japan, where he had held off both McLarens. Red Bull still had title ambitions. Bahrain removed them. He qualified 7th. In the race, he had balance problems and brake problems. Then the pit stops failed. The team's automatic traffic light system on the pit gantry did not switch from red to green, and both Verstappen and Yuki Tsunoda sat waiting in their boxes. Verstappen dropped as low as 20th. He spent the afternoon racing Haas, Williams, and Alpine cars. He finished 6th after a last lap pass on Pierre Gasly. more than 30 seconds behind Oscar Piastri. It left him 8 points behind Lando Norris. After the race, Sky Sports F1's Ted Kravitz was watching the Red Bull garage. He reported that Vermeulen entered, gave Helmut Marko what can only be described as a piece of his mind, remonstrated with him while Marko stood and took it, then walked off at the back of the garage, removing his pass as he went. The description went viral within hours. Fans clipped the Kravitz segment. Some framed it as Marko receiving the treatment he had spent years giving to other drivers. Others framed it as evidence that Red Bull was coming apart. Then the reporting split. Planet F1, citing sources close to the situation, reported that no confrontation targeting Marko specifically had taken place, and that Verstappen's management had made their dissatisfaction known more broadly. The gap between the eyewitness account and the clarification became part of the story. 4 days later in Jeddah, Verstappen was asked about it. He confirmed the conversation and rejected the framing. "I think, to my knowledge, they were having just a conversation about everything, which I think is allowed." He said Christian Horner had joined the discussion as well. He said everyone was frustrated with the result and that people caring about results was normal. Marko had also told Sky Germany that the concern was great that Verstappen could leave if the car did not improve. Verstappen's answer was short. He did not know why Marko had said it. A lot of people were discussing his future except him, and commentators should stick to commentating. Now move forward to August 2026. Verstappen is 28. He is 6th or 7th in the standings. His contract runs to 2028 with performance-based exit clauses, and the clause allowing him to leave after 2026 is active. Reports from Bild claimed Red Bull had offered him a deal to 2029 with a salary increase on a base already around 65 million euros a year in exchange for deleting the clauses. GP Blog reported that Red Bull's management wanted the exit clauses gone entirely. On 3 August 2026, Jos Verstappen replied to that coverage on X. In Dutch, "Jullie weten helemaal niks." In English, "You know absolutely nothing." That is the exchange, and that is the response. What follows is how a garage argument in Bahrain became a 65 million euro standoff 16 months later. The operational collapse that lit the fuse. To understand why Vermeulen was angry enough to take his pass off, you have to understand what Red Bull used to be and what it had become by that Sunday afternoon in the desert. Red Bull built its modern reputation on the choreography of the pit box. In 2024, roughly 59% of the team's tire changes were completed in 2.5 seconds or less, the kind of number that turns a marginal undercut into a certainty. By the opening rounds of 2025, that figure had cratered to around 27%, with several stops sailing past the 3.5-second threshold, generally treated as a botched job. The crown jewel of Red Bull's operational identity had quietly turned into a liability. Bahrain was where the quiet part became loud. Verstappen's first stop, soft to hard, stretched past 4 seconds, around 4.72, because the gantry lights simply refused to go green. He sat there, engine loaded, waiting for a signal that never arrived, refusing to drive through it, because protocol says you wait. Tsunoda hit the same wall a minute later, roughly 4.26 seconds lost, the middle yellow light flashing beside the stubborn red. Then came the second stop, 6.2 seconds, made worse by a right front wheel that refused to seat cleanly. That was the moment the race disappeared. Verstappen fell to the back of the field, and only a mid-race safety car handed him enough of a lifeline to claw his way back to 6th. Christian Horner explained afterwards that the cause was a wiring loom or electrical fault in the pit gantry, a failure he said he had never encountered before in his career. The team's first instinct had been to blame a human, a technician not pressing the release button hard enough. Only when the identical fault struck Tsunoda's car did they accept the machine had betrayed them, switching to a manual override with the chief mechanic releasing cars by hand. Verstappen's own verdict was unvarnished. Asked what had gone wrong, he said, "Basically everything went wrong." He listed the wheel spin off the line, the balance and grip that had haunted him since qualifying, overheating tires, the frozen lights, and the second stop that dumped him to last. Marko was not in the mood for perspective. He called the day very difficult and very alarming and said the failure of basic procedures like pit stops was not acceptable. And this is the detail that turns Bahrain from a bad Sunday into a pattern. Kravitz later expanded on the Sky Sports F1 podcast that Vermeulen appeared specifically irritated by the pit stops because they were not isolated. Japan had produced a slow stop that put Verstappen into contact with Norris. Bahrain produced the lights twice, plus the sticky wheel. 4 operational failures across 2 race weekends at a team whose entire brand was the absence of them. Kravitz's point cut to the heart of it. When the car isn't quick enough to win, the one thing a team of that stature owes its driver is a flawless afternoon at the pit wall. Red Bull couldn't even offer that. There were other stains too. A human error release at the Miami Sprint that fired Verstappen out alongside an arriving Kimi Antonelli, and slower stops in Japan traced to a backup crew. Reporting linked the decline to the exit of senior operational figures like Jonathan Wheatley. So when Vermeulen walked into that garage, he wasn't reacting to one race. He was reacting to an institution losing the thing it was best at: power, politics, and the men at the top. The second component is not mechanical at all. It is human, and it runs through the peculiar architecture of Red Bull Racing, a British team in Milton Keynes, owned by an Austrian drinks empire, with a driver whose father sits permanently at the edge of the frame. Helmut Marko was the architect of Max Verstappen's career. It was Marko who pulled the teenager into the Red Bull Junior program, Marko who forced the mid-2016 promotion to the senior team. For years, he was Verstappen's fiercest advocate in the boardroom, a man whose blunt assessments of other drivers were legendary, and whose loyalty to this one was absolute. Jos Verstappen occupied a different chair entirely. A former Formula One driver himself, protective to the point of confrontation, he had already clashed publicly with Christian Horner. The Verstappen camp was never a passenger in Red Bull's politics. It was a faction. By early 2025, those alliances had reorganized themselves into something combustible. McLaren had overtaken Red Bull on pure pace. The internal investigations and media leaks that had swirled around Horner in earlier seasons had left a sediment of distrust that never fully settled. Marko and the Verstappen camp had drifted into alignment against aspects of Horner's leadership, while Horner retained the ownership's formal backing. Every slow pit stop now landed on top of that structure, and every operational error was read as evidence in an argument that was already running. That is why Verstappen's Jeddah answer mattered more than it appeared to. By naming Horner as a participant in the conversation, he confirmed that this had not been a manager scolding an advisor. It had been the team's power centers in one room, after a race that had gone wrong in every direction at once. The equilibrium did not hold. Through the first half of 2025, the pressure compounded car performance, ownership scrutiny in the years after Dietrich Mateschitz's death, and the interpersonal friction that Bahrain had made visible to the public. In July 2025, Christian Horner was removed as team principal and replaced by Laurent Mekies, promoted from the sister Racing Bulls squad. The effect was immediate, and for a while, transformative. Verstappen later described the return of a Red Bull-style positivity that had gone missing. Development became coherent, setup experimentation became disciplined, the high-profile process errors thinned out. From roughly the Belgian and Dutch Grand Prix period onward, Verstappen and the RB21 found a working window, and he produced 6 wins in the final 10 races. He closed to within 2 points of the championship and finished runner-up to Lando Norris. Marko himself left at the end of 2025 and later delivered the line that hangs over the whole episode, that an earlier change of leadership would have handed Verstappen a 5th consecutive title, which reframes Bahrain completely. That garage confrontation was not a tantrum. It was the first visible tremor of a fault line that would swallow a team principal, an advisor, and very nearly a championship. 2026, the clause wakes up. If 2025 was the crisis Red Bull survived, 2026 is the one it may not. The new regulations arrived, and Red Bull arrived with them badly. The team spent the early rounds outside the top 3, wrestling a car that Verstappen has criticized openly, alongside power unit rules he has attacked with even less restraint. Reliability turned hostile. Rear wing problems caused spins and crashes in Austria and at Silverstone, and Verstappen described himself as fed up with failures he considers dangerous. Upgrades around the Austrian Grand Prix produced a genuine step. Podiums returned, but the gap to the front never closed. Then came Silverstone, and a weekend that compressed the entire season into 2 hours. He spun and beached the car at Stowe, in front of the Lando stand, triggering the safety car that ended the race and left more than 150,000 fans booing a finish that never happened. But the retirement wasn't the story that Paddock took home. The story was what the DNF exposed underneath it, a relationship that had been eroding in private for weeks. Reporting from Dutch journalist Eric van Haren of De Telegraaf, a name with a long record of being right about Verstappen, set out what had been building. And the friction has a mechanism, not just a mood. Verstappen's race engineer, Gianpiero Lambiase, is bound for McLaren from 2028, which means Red Bull cannot hand him everything they used to hand him. And an engineer without full information cannot give a driver full information. The chain has one more link, and it ends in the cockpit. Layer that on top of setup decisions that went against him, including a pit lane start he wanted and did not get. And the picture is a driver deferring to a team that keeps getting it wrong. And this is where the contract stops stops being paperwork and becomes a live weapon. The exit clause is performance-based, and the trigger is brutally simple. 2 races out from the break, sitting 6th or 7th with a substantial deficit, the maths had already decided the matter for him. The clause is armed. The only remaining question is the deadline attached to it. October, that is the fuse Red Bull has been trying to defuse all summer, and the reason a contract offer appeared on the table at all. Everything now runs through the second half of 2026 and the October deadline. If the car improves, the clause expires quietly, and Jos Verstappen's 4 words become a footnote. If it doesn't, the most successful driver-team partnership of the modern era ends over a wiring fault, a rear wing, and a conversation in a garage that a reporter happened to be watching.